Hey guys, in this video, I will show you how I sculpt a face in real time in just 20 minutes. When doing the head, I always start out with a sphere and I use the grab brush into the sculpt mode to just bring down the chin area. And this will also let me know where front view is gonna be. It's a lot easier to determine. And for the focal length, I set it to 100 millimeters. And that will give me a nice view for my perspective view so it's not distorted, the face. And then on to the remesh section, and I set the voxel size to a lower value, 0.05 usually works for me. And you want it just low enough so that when you smooth the mesh, you're not going to be melting down the clay. But do keep in mind that you don't want the voxel size to be too low where you are going to have a difficult time smoothing and shaping out the mesh. In Blender, a lower amount of voxel size will give you more polygons to work with. So really just mess around with this to give you the right amount that you need. And here, I like to use the clay strip brush to push in the clay for the eye socket and the nasal opening. So at the beginning, I create the basic shape of the skull for the head. And by creating the basic shape of the skull structure, I'm able to determine exactly later on where I'm going to be placing the facial features like the eyes and the nose and the lips. I'm going to be able to better determine where the muscles need to connect once I have the bony structure down. Yeah, so definitely creating the skull is very, very important part of the process when you want to create something realistic. And here I'm just using my grab brush to just further shape out the overall proportion of the skull. And here just creating the jaw area. Going back and forth between the grab brush and the clay strip brush. Usually the main brushes that I use are the clay strip brush, the grab brush, the draw brush, and the smooth brush, and also the crease brush. Not a lot of brushes, and this is the thing why I also really like Blender. You don't really need a lot of brushes. I know that in ZBrush you have a lot of brushes, a lot more brushes than Blender, but really to create something outstanding, you don't need that much brushes really. And so here I am using the clay strip brush, just pushing the clay here to give it more of a depth on the back of the skull. Pushing in the clay and pushing out the clay. And when you are doing the skull, you also have to think about what ethnicity you want your character to be. So if you're doing more of a Caucasian man or a Caucasian woman, then the skull structure is not going to be protruding as much in the front area. So the cheekbones and the jaw area is not going to be protruding as much. And right there, I just created like a indication of where the eyeball is going to be using the clay strip brush. Later on, if I do want to open up the eyes of the character, I will have to add some eyeballs in there. But you see that I've added clay on top of the eye socket area so that I have some visual information to work with to serve as a guide for assisting me on adjusting the overall structure of the face. And when it's time to add a little bit of information in the eyes, it's best to bring down the voxel size so you have more polygons to work with. When you're starting to add more and more of the features of the face, like the eyes, the nose, or the lips, then the more you have to increase the poly count for your mesh. But at the same time, you don't want it too high where you're not able to smooth or manipulate as easily as you want to when you're doing this. And yeah, you just going and making sure that you look in all views as you do this, going into the perspective view, side view, front view. Look in all views as you do this. And as you can see there, I'm using the clay strip brush to just lay down some clay on the nasal opening. And then using the grab brush to just shape it out further. Pull that down, pull it up. So what I'm going for is more like a Caucasian man. So the face is not going to be as pronounced. It's going to be a little bit flatter on the face. And as I mentioned before, if you have to think about the ethnicity of the character, if you're doing more of an African-American man, then when you're doing the skull at the beginning, you have to create a wider opening for the nasal opening area. And also you have to make sure that the front part of the skull has to be protruding out a little bit more forward. And if you're doing an Asian ethnicity, an Asian character, then you should have the cheekbone just a little bit higher and more pronounced. So really think about the ethnicity of your character and how you're going to be doing the skull based on that. And yes, you could see once you add the skull structure, it's going to be a lot easier for you to determine exactly where you're going to be adding the fat on the face and the muscles on the face. And here I'm using the crease brush to just carve in the clay to create the opening for the nose there. And constantly just remeshing and remeshing as I add more and more of the information in the face. And here, I'm just going to be using my crease brush to just carve in the area for the lips. And I'm going to bring down the voxel size since I added a new facial feature. That way we have more polys to work with. And remesh it. And then using the clay strip brush, just pushing in the clay with the clay strip brush. And then adding a little bit more of the volume on the upper lips. When I'm doing the upper lips, I'm thinking of the Cupid's bow. So it has a little bit of that shape. Cupid's bow when you're rotating at 90 degrees. And then the bottom here, just adding a little bit of volume for the lower lips. Right now, it looks like he is biting his lips, but it's okay. I'm going to show you how I fix that area. But right now, just thinking of those basic forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask the bottom part here of the lips, of the lower face, the jaw and everything. And then using my grab brush, I'm going to pull this out, the upper lip area. When you're looking at the bottom, you should think of it how it still should be wrapped around as if it's in a cylinder, the lips. So you don't want to have flat lips. So always look at the bottom and the top view of your lips, making sure that it looks like it's still kind of wrapping around a cylindrical form. And also you have to think about that when you're doing the lips, the upper lip should be a little bit protruded more forward than the bottom lip area. And here I'm just adding the basic shape of the jaw using the draw brush, just poking it out a little bit. So I used the draw brush to add a little bit of bulk on the face, and then the clay strip brush to just lay down the fat and the muscles. So each of the brushes that I use have a certain purpose. So yeah, the draw brush to add volume, the crease brush to carve in some definition on the body or in the face of the character, the grab brush to just overall modify the overall proportion of the face. Or if I need to just tweak, nudge a few things here and there, I use the grab brush. And I use the inflate brush also to bulk up the face sometimes. And the smooth brush, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Everybody uses the smooth brush. Can't live without it. So as you can see me, I'm always looking at the bottom view and the front view of the lip area. Because I see a lot of beginners, they tend to ignore that view of when they're doing 3D. And when you don't look from the top and the bottom view, it's a little bit more difficult to see whether your character is starting to look flat or not. And so here I'm just adding some of that fat on the face area. When this is your first time just doing a face, I highly suggest that you look at some exercise of the human anatomy, the facial anatomy, and just study how the face is constructed and how the muscles connect on the skull. And think about the eyes right here, just carving in the clay. And there you go. Looking from the top here. And I could push this a little bit using the grab brush, just kind of modify. So from the top view of the eyes, you need to make sure that it still look like it's kind of wrapping around an eyeball. And here, just smoothing out the clay because I feel like the temporal line on the side of the skull here, it's a little bit too intense, so just smooth it. And here, just better indicating the frontal bone. So if you're doing a male character, you're going to see more of the temporal line on the forehead show up more, and also the frontal bone. But of course, there's always going to be also females that probably you could, if you want to make it look manly, then just by enhancing the bony landmark on the face, then you would make her look masculine. And right here, I'm just masking the area where I know the ears are going to be extruded out. And I'm going to use my Gudo Move brush here and set the pivot to mask border. And then move it so that I have a mesh to work with for the ears. And then using my grab brush here to just kind of do the basic shape of the ear area. And of course, make sure you remesh it every time you protrude a new mesh. And just carving that in, just carving and pushing that clay in. You're going to use my scrape brush here to just flatten the clay area here for the ears. And then just kind of nudge this to make it shape more like an ear. And when you're doing the ears, you don't want it too long. You don't want the top of the ears to go above the brow ridge. And you don't want the bottom of the ears to go below the nose area. So if you start to see that the bottom of the ears go way below the nose area, then the ears start to go way above the brow ridge, that means the ears is too long or too large. So you need to adjust the size. And just flatten this out a little bit more. And I'm going to be using my crease brush to carve in a little bit more of the information for the ears here. So the inner part, I'm just pushing in for the depth. When I do the ears, I think of a question mark, which signifies the outer rim shape of the ears. And then I think of the letter Y inside the shape of the ear. So I think of the question mark, a question mark symbol, and I think of the letter Y as I do the ears. And then here, I'm just adding more of the cheekbones and a little bit more of defining the jaw area. Yeah, and constantly just remeshing it. If you are sculpting your character and you feel like you can't really retain the details anymore, then you probably have to adjust the voxel size. But just be careful not to decrease the voxel size too much, all right? Especially if you're just in the beginning stages of sculpting. A common mistake that a lot of beginner sculptors do is they decrease the voxel size on the remesher section way too soon, to the point where there are too many polygons on the mesh. If you increase the resolution too soon, this makes it difficult for you to shape out your mesh. In order to get a great result, you need to spend as much time with the primary forms before you even go to detailing. A lot of students cannot wait to get to the detailing part, such as adding wrinkles and deep muscles in the character. I know this is really one of the fun parts of sculpting, but if you go to that process too soon, it's going to be much harder for you to go back and fix the proportion, or any tweaks that need to be made on the character is just going to be a lot more difficult. So how will you know if it's time to go to the detailing stage? Okay, let me share with you what I would do. This is what works for me. After I sculpt my primary forms, I wait out for a couple of days, just going back and reviewing the shapes. Sometimes your eyes just need to take a break from looking at the same artwork for hours. Then when you get back to it, you will come back with refreshed eyes, and guarantee each time you come back to your work, you will see a problem that you have never seen before. So yeah, this is just times when patience on your part is very important. Also, learning the anatomy is the most important thing that you can do as a character artist. I really suggest that if you want to get good at sculpting something realistic, even if you're planning to do stylized, then it's still so important to understand anatomy. You can basically use any software that you want and still produce an amazing looking result if you understand anatomy. Whether it's ZBrush, Blender, Maya, or 3ds Max, as long as you understand the fundamentals, you will be able to create a character that is just as good. If you know the anatomy, you won't just be copying whatever you see. You will actually understand why a certain form or a specific protrusion is there on the face. You will know exactly what is creating that shape you see on whatever part of the human body you are sculpting. And this, guys, is very, very empowering. Because you're not just guessing and sculpting what you're seeing. You can make actual connections on why the surface is formed a certain way. And that will change the way you view the human anatomy. If you guys have not checked it out yet, I have an extensive course at victory3d.com where I dive deep into the bony landmarks, the muscles, and fat of the human body. So if you're serious about becoming a great character artist, no matter what software you're using, please feel free to check it out. Oh yeah, so just here I am just going over the face and just further tweaking the overall shape using the grab brush. And as you can see here that I have changed the material for this one. So when you are sculpting the body, the face, or really any type of character, you need to do a little bit of experimentation. You need to play around with the material, play around with the lighting, manipulate the lighting, change up the position of the lighting, change the material that you're using, because depending on the material that you're using, on one material you might not see a mistake, but then if you use another material you might see a mistake that you haven't spotted before. And the same with lighting. You need to sometimes adjust your lighting here and there. Maybe one time the light's going to be a little bit further to the left, and then later you're going to move it a little bit further to the right, and that kind of also refreshes your eyes to see your artwork in a brand new way. Yeah, by changing the matte setup, it modifies how the lighting influences your mesh. So you could see more if there's any issues on your skin. Maybe there are parts of your skin that are too lumpy and you're not able to see that on one particular type of lighting or material. But when you change the material and lighting, you could actually see that your sculpt have a little too much lumps and bumps that you don't really want. And so then you're gonna have to smooth out your mesh just to get a much cleaner result. And yeah, here just deepening the eyes. So this is just me creating and sculpting this in real time in 20 minutes. Yeah, and Of course, if you want to take it further and add more details, go ahead and feel free to do that. And here I'm just masking the front of the face here and the ears area, masking this area out, and then using my grab brush to just kind of make the head here a little bigger at the top because I feel like it's a little flat. This is what's good about masking, guys. You're able to manipulate part of the mesh without affecting the other parts. And using my grab brush for that, looking in all views. There you go. And add a little bit more clay and smoothing it. And there you go.